Okay. All right, friends, countrymen, Romans, lend me your ears. I come not to praise Caesar, but to bury him. All right, there you go, your daily dose of Shakespeare. All righty. I don't know, do I have a Q&A slide anywhere? I have no idea what's going on today. Perfect, no questions, I love it. All right, so, I'm trying to think if there's any important stuff to cover here. Obviously, Friday, you got your grades back. I know because my phone then exploded with appointments being booked. My appointment scheduling is pretty full at the moment. I do plan to open some more. I just finished my intro to methods class. So I'm done with that thing a week early as always. So I'll try to open up slots probably like, I guess we've just got tomorrow, but like Wednesday and then next Wednesday, Friday, starting at like 9 a.m. Till 11, I'll open up some more slots and I'll see what else I can open up in my schedule if people want to come and see their exams. I mean, the class average was just a hair under 80, so it's a good class average. For me, that's, pretty normal, but, obviously your mileage may vary. You're on the lower end of that, I don't know. But do book an appointment if you want to take a look. Obviously, that is that. Anything else? I guess we're just like moving smoothly-ish to the end of the semester. Something to note. I uploaded a updated version of the Nun slides, and you might notice, if you look, that the old one ended here. And then because, I don't know, I'm cruel and despicable, I added like that many more slides. And most of them are charts. So, go re-download the file. Erica's giving me this death stare at the moment, like, oh, come on, dude. How much more interesting stuff is there to say about the nuns? And there's lots, actually. Look at these pretty graphics. It's so pretty. I'm so sorry. I'm a bad person. Okay, so, and yet no one is commenting, so perfect. All right, we were talking about our nothing in particulars, right? Our non-religious people, and I guess I will track back a couple of slides and just give us a sort of quick recap to kind of catch us up. It's always fun after the weekend. We were talking about retention rates. Okay, there's Rodney. Hi, Rodney. We talked about a little bit about retention rates. That's where we ended off, right? And we just noted that, overall, what we see kind of generally is outside of evangelicals who are pretty consistent in their retention rate, most other major religious traditions have seen, and I mean, even evangelicals, they're kind of 5 points down from where they were in the 1970s, but pretty consistent. All of our other main traditions have seen major declines in retention, right? Mainline Protestant, Black Protestants, Catholics, used to be that in the 1970s, 85% of people raised Catholic stayed Catholic. That by the 2010s, that's down to just a hair over 2/3. Other faiths, still pretty consistent. That said, a lot of that is recent immigrants, and so a lot of that is going to be, the mileage is going to vary a little bit on that in terms of how long they're in the United States is going to play a role. But then the big shift is no religion, right? People raised without religion back in the 1970s, only about a third of them stayed with identifying as non-religious in later adulthood, and they've gotten much more efficient at that. By the 2010s, it's about 2/3 who will stay. So, okay, did I talk about this one? I don't remember. I'm so lost. Oh yes, because I know I talked about this chart, and I believe I threatened you all with a good time of saying I would just put this chart on the exam and all of the question would be like, for 10 marks, explain. Or explain, exclamation mark. There we go. No, I won't do that. The question will be slightly longer, but it will still be explain this chart. No, maybe. I haven't decided yet. It's the end of the semester. My mood varies from day to day between I want to torment students to I just want this to be over as soon as possible. Not that you're not all lovely. It's just, been a while since I slept a full night through. Okay, I guess notable things on this chart, is really, again, that really pretty high retention rate for evangelicals. The fact that evangelicals tend to draw people from other traditions or no tradition at all at pretty high rates. Sorry, that's up this one. So evangelicals, tradition as an adult, so evangelical is pretty efficient. Evangelical mainline, they're attracting 14%. They're drawing 36% of the unclassified. This is a piss off category, hate that one. What does it mean? I don't know. No religion, right? So they're attracting 16% from no religion and drawing a good number of Catholics and Black Protestant. So evangelicals, pretty efficient by religious standards, right? For the rest of our categories, what we generally see is pretty weak outcomes. Except for the no religion, right? No religion, again, is drawing members from pretty much every other tradition. It's efficiently holding on to itself, but everywhere else, right, it's in double digits in terms of its draw. Okay. This is probably the slide that we ended off on now that I think about it. I don't remember. It was like Thursday and time has no meaning. And my kids are on spring break and all this darkness. I had to drive out to the horse ranch for a second day in a row to drop off my daughter. Because apparently there's horse chores to be done, but she doesn't want to get up. I still have to drag her out of bed, which is super fun. Okay, again, really interesting to kind of note probably the growth of the nuns, right? So in what tradition did people grow up in? More and more people, by birth decade are growing, but this is just by decade, not by birth decade. More and more people are growing up as nuns, right? So that percentage is increasing. So they're remaining as nuns. And then Catholics, right? And I noted this, Catholics do tend to over-contribute to the nuns by a pretty fair margin, right? Catholics only make up about, on average, 20% of the US population, but here they're always over-contributing, right? And evangelicals, who make up, depending on the year, right? And here it would be about 30%. That's the peak. And then, it's usually somewhere around, somewhere 25 to 21%. I wrote that backwards, but whatever. 21 to 25%. And you see how much evangelicals kind of under-contribute to the phenomenon of the nuns, right? So again, evangelicals, from the data, seem to be more efficient at kind of holding on to their members and not having their members shift to nothing in particular, whereas Catholics are definitely over-contributing to the non-religious kind of people. And this will become even more apparent on the next chart. I know you all love the charts. And again, our mainliners used to contribute a lot back in the 1970s. It's declined as mainline has declined. And nothing could be more stark than this particular graph, right? So this is blue line, current religion, and red line, or are you currently? And the red line is where you raised at. So what do we see? Well, evangelicals, right, for the most part, all the way into the 2010s, were retaining more members than they were losing, right? Now that shifts about here, right? You could call that the check engine light moment, that something has gone wrong if you're an evangelical and you want people to stay in that tradition, right? This is your check engine light moment. That's, how Ryan puts it. This is the funny one, right? Here, right, these are our Catholics. And consistently, and again, this is way back, this is 1900, right? So this is data way back. Now, okay, sorry. This data is from 1972 to 2018. So what Burge is doing here is he is taking sort of when people were born and correlating that data back to kind of figure out what the past looks like. And what we see for Catholics is going right back to the turn of the 20th century. It looks like Catholics were losing more members, right? They always have had more people that were raised in that tradition but no longer are, versus, how many people are still in the tradition. But through the 20th century, but really accelerating in the 1960s, that gap gets way bigger, right? So, if the evangelicals, the check engine light comes on in the 90s or 2010s, for Catholics, the engine fell out of the car, 100 years ago, 126 years ago, right? So, if you're Catholic and you're like, man, are we doing a good job? No, you're not. You've been losing members forever. You're incredibly inefficient at retaining membership. So there you go. If we look at our main lines, it's just like a plummeting line, right? And again, this is consistent with that Stark argument in the Churching of America, right? The main line, their total numbers, right? Even the raised-in number has been declining for a long time, and that current number has been declining too, right? So there's just so many people, or so many fewer people now that are raised in the main line or remain in the main line. Black Protestants, they lose a bit more than they retain, but it's pretty flat lines overall. And no religion, right? Back in the 1910s, it was pretty even in terms of current and raised, but it was a small number, right? A very small percentage of the American population. But it's grown over time, right? So, and raised, so we see raised is about 20% of people were raised without religion, but, we're better than 35% were reporting no religion. Okay, so big growth, and obviously people jumping in that weren't raised as nothing or no religion that are coming in. I'm like, this should be astonishing, right? It's like something like by 2000, 45% of people said they were raised Catholic, and it's like, 25, maybe 24, 25% who are still Catholic, right? So you see that. Why are you being like this, Pen? You see that massive gap, right? And what that probably means for the future of American Catholicism is not a great thing. Now, I guess if you want some good news there, the line's a little flatter than it used to be, so there's that. Okay. So, what do the nuns believe? And here, once again, this is from Thiessen and Laflamme's book, nothing or none of the above. And this is, again, just to highlight the totally confusing mishmash of beliefs that fall under this category of the nuns. I sigh. 64% of nuns believe in God or a universal spirit. So, are they secular? I guess not quite. We'll discuss this a little bit more as we go forward, because there's other practical questions that we can ask. Right? 34% of the nuns say they don't believe in God or a universal spirit. Only 13% say they are atheists, right? So atheists make up the minority, a pretty small minority of the nuns. 52% of U.S. nuns believe in life after death, 41% in heaven, 29% in hell, and then the gap there, in terms of afterlife, like the gap between 41 and 52 is going to be made up for by more kind of vague beliefs in the afterlife. Yeah, but here I'm much more consistent, and here, this is a much more secular belief. So, if you want your inherited model proof or your late secularization proof or what have you, 74% of US nuns believe the Bible was written by men rather than having divine origin. So, a much more kind of secular thought there. Okay. Canadian data is poor quality and low resolution because when it comes to religion, Canadians apparently are just not that interested, much to my chagrin, which is why I spend all my time talking about Americans, because Americans are super interested in this question. Okay, so the Canadian data is, I would say, pretty low resolution. The best data that Thiessen and Laflamme had was this Angus Reid poll from 2017 of 657 religious nuns, and this is a non-representative sample, right? So this is not probability sampling. So like I said, it's pretty low resolution data. Now, 72% of Canadian nuns in this sample said they do not believe in God or a universal spirit, and 68% don't believe in life after death. So potentially, you could make the argument that Canada is much further along in that secularization process than the United States, because our nuns, are less likely to believe in the afterlife. And yeah, Reg Bibby, who used to be at U Lethbridge, he's now retired, but he was, prior to Thiessen and Laflamme being the big honchos of sociology of religion in Canada, it was Reginald Bibby at University of Lethbridge. Again, kind of a third tier school. Can I say that about University of Lethbridge? Third tier school. Okay, I'm getting, Daisha is saying that's okay. I don't want to be mean to University of Lethbridge, but whatever. I only say this because it's not like the top tier schools in Canada that have a really strong program in social religion. It's places like Ambrose and Lethbridge. I guess Sarah Laflamme is at Waterloo, so that's a pretty good school. But Canadians have three categories. Either they embrace religion, and this is a shrinking group. They reject religion, a growing group, or they're somewhere in the middle and a sort of tolerance towards religion. That was kind of a middle group. And the nuns in this Angus Reid poll, and again, take this with 1,000 grains of salt because it is a really poor data set. We're in the reject religion category. So again, we can't, I don't think we can say anything too definitive about this data because we just don't have anything like the CES. Does anyone have really rich parents? Because I would just I need a sponsor to have me do a YouGov poll. Oh, shit, I need to tell you guys something. Breaking news in the sociology of religion sphere. And I'm not even kidding, because this happened last Thursday, and I found out about it after class. Okay, so this happened on March 26th. Okay, so you remember I told you about this poll in the UK, right? Was it the Quiet Revolution, the thing that came from the Bible Society? So Thursday of last week, probably like a day or so after I told you about it, they retracted the report. And the reason they retracted the report was because the polling firm they used, which is YouGov, can I say this politely or should I just say it with bad words? I'm going to say it with bad words. They fucked up. So they forgot to turn on the quality control software for the poll. So the poll didn't filter out people who answered the poll twice. It didn't filter out people who weren't in the UK. So those were the two big categories. It didn't filter out people who weren't in the UK and people who answered the poll more than twice or any of the quality control software. And YouGov told the Bible Society about that in late February. And then, last Thursday, the Bible Society retracted the findings from the Quiet Revival report, right? So that is a really interesting piece of data that is now kind of in the dustbin. Now the Bible Society did kind of come back on this, saying, okay, stuff happens. We're going to run another poll in 2026 to see what kind of results we get. I see your question, Jasmine. And they kind of looked at data from like the British Social Attitudes Survey and the Pew Landscape Survey in the UK to kind of still say like, look, it looks like something's happening. I could pull those numbers and show you, but I'm not going to because we already passed that part of the course. But I did want to say that is a colossal fuck up, and that is not the Bible Society, that is YouGov. What did Jasmine?
Are we still doing tests on that?
Yeah, I'm going to take that out because no longer relevant, shall we say. Yeah, I can't test you on false data, I think. So we're going to just take that part out. But, I did want to, bring that up because it is, like, A, I want to tell you the truth. I don't want to deceive you into thinking something's going on that isn't. And two, like, interesting things happen in social research, like polling companies whose job it is to get stuff right forget to check a box that says, make sure poll is accurate. And then the whole thing goes to shit. And then, it's really embarrassing. And now we've got victory laps by all the people who are criticizing, the Bible Society's reports. They're like, yeah, you were wrong. And the Bible Society's kind of walking it back and being like, yeah, but there still seems to be something going on. And we look at some other stuff from the, British Social Attitudes Survey and other stuff. And there is interesting things. I still think there's an interesting story there. But yeah, no, you won't be tested on this now colossally garbagey chunk of data, which we now have to just throw in the trash. Because we don't know. I mean, it could still be good because we don't have any evidence that a bunch of people did answer the survey or people from outside the UK did because they didn't track it because they forgot to turn on their quality control software. So there you go. Now we don't really know what's going on. Okay, cool. I will say it's much harder to find pictures of like crosses and Canadian flags than crosses and American flags. This one took me a while. So still really good. I like this picture. It's beautiful. Okay, so this Angus Reid data, and again, let's take this with a grain of salt. In our religiously affiliated and no religious affiliation kind of groupings, right? What do we have? So belief in extraterrestrials. Aliens are among us. We see a pretty good gap. Our non-religious cohort, much more likely to say that they believe in extraterrestrials. Belief in reincarnation, turning back into a flower. No, carnation flower. Terrible joke. I'm sorry. Right? Religious people, no surprise there, are more likely to believe in reincarnation. However, a third of our non-religious cohort still says they believe in reincarnation, which again is this weird supernatural belief, right? It's a sort of unchurched supernaturalism largely, right? Common amongst like Buddhists and Hindus, but we've seen Buddhists and Hindus don't make up that big of a part of the Canadian population, so I doubt it could rise to 33%. So that's weird. 72% of the religiously affiliated believe in miracles. I think that number is shockingly low, but whatever. And then 42% of the non-affiliated, which again suggests that the non-affiliated are a really mixed bag in terms of beliefs, right? It's like I don't believe in God, but miracles, sure. From whence do those miracles come? I don't know, nor do I care. Ninja Turtles, whatever. Belief in hell, right? Much more common amongst the religiously affiliated, though still a minority position. And 18%. Nobody wants to believe in hell, right? It's unpleasant. Belief in heaven, much more likely amongst the religiously affiliated, although still only 77%. And maybe this is the low resolution of this sample. That one seems on the low side to me, but whatever. People are people. And 32% of the non-religiously affiliated, which again is a weird number. If this is secularization, what is going on? Question mark, question mark, question mark. Belief in that life on Earth is a purely biological phenomenon. I don't know if this is the weird question. Okay, so religiously affiliated doesn't surprise me that this is only 5%, right? Because, to believe otherwise is like, there's a God, but God doesn't do anything, so okay, fair enough. The fact that this is only 37% of the no religious affiliation cohort leads me to wondering, what is it they actually think, right? What would be the alternative? Maybe this is a bad question. I look at that, I'm like, it's a little wordy and maybe a little hard to understand. So maybe that's it, but it's still a confusing number, right? And again, it sort of, I think, lends credibility to sort of Stark's assertion that as we move away from church and organized religion, people aren't moving into metaphysical naturalism or pure materialism. They're moving into a hodgepodge of sort of like invisible religion and boutique beliefs that aren't particularly structured, which makes data fun to read, by the way. Did you know that the singular of data is datum? Fun fact, I'm reminded of this every time I teach social methods, that data is a datum, and it sounds weird every time I say it. Okay, belief that we are all part of a mysterious and inexplicable force. Who's the force, Luke? I don't know again, this is a weird question, and I don't like it because I don't know what it means. But 12% of the religiously affiliated, 32% of the non-affiliated, which again, this is probably a really boutique-y view. I love this one. I believe in God, but in my own way, right? So, nearly 50% of the religiously affiliated are like, yeah, okay. I was gonna say a bad word. I should stop. Whatever the church says, I don't care. I think God is a pink unicorn in heaven, right? Or whatever. I have no idea. Again, this is a weird question, but it's interesting. And 30% of the non-religiously affiliated, which I'm kind of, deeply okay with, but again, sort of points to some weird unchurched supernaturalisms going on. And then belief in God as taught by the church. No surprise here, right? The religiously unaffiliated, it's a sampling error. But even here, right, the religiously affiliated, only 35% of them are like, I am religiously affiliated and I actually believe what my religion teaches me, which again is a weird kind of number and maybe goes to the resolution of this study. But since, I complain about how low resolution the data is, let's look at more of it. Okay. Importance of religion and spirituality in everyday life, Canada, right? So in our non-religiously affiliated, very important and somewhat important, right? Though not a majority of the sample by any stretch, right? 67% of the religiously unaffiliated are in the not very important to not at all important category, but 43% are still in the very important to somewhat important category, which I would love to tell you is mildly frustrating. I guess when we talk about spirituality, right, this could just be straight up spirituality, which is why in really good samples, and I'll show you some better data from the US in a couple minutes, or next class, I don't know. It depends how fast we get through this. Splitting out religion and spirituality does give us higher resolution data. Lumping them together makes for this very confusing, 43% of the sample that again looks like something else. Okay, the religiously affiliated, right? It's sort of 75%, religion and spirituality is very important. No surprises there. Although, there is this chunk who say they're religiously affiliated who also apparently, 25% who kind of don't give an F, right? Which again is just mildly confusing. In the US, right? Religion or spirituality is important to my everyday life. I think, 33%, interesting, that say strongly agree or agree. So no surprise there. And again, now we've got 76%. So American nuns actually here are slightly less likely to say religion and spirituality is important or they strongly agree that it's important to their everyday life. So slightly less than Canadian nuns. So I guess Canadian nuns are slightly more spiritual than American nuns. I'm gonna run with that one. And the religiously affiliated are about the same, right? Okay. Spiritual or religious practices. Okay. What do we got here? So these are our, this is our populations over. What do I have on this slide? This is from Thiessen and Laflamme, and I'm having trouble interpreting my own slide. Oh, I gotcha. So these are for our nuns, right? I was reading it backwards, and I thought this was an 81% for, and I was super confused. But now I understand. It's not at all. They put this in the opposite order than what I thought. Yeah, just me.
You should give us 2.5 hours for the final.
Okay.
Just like for the charts.
Okay. Can I make them really tiny so it's much harder to see? I could probably give you 2.5 hours, but it's going to be, all the questions are just going to be charts and with the word explain. No. Detailed explanations, please. Connect to theories. What boutique theory of religion would Dr. Brassard interpret this chart as representing? Go. For 50 marks, the whole shebang, one question. It's going to be like a scatter dot graph, and you're just going to have to figure it out. I'm kidding, of course. I don't hate you all. I promise. There will be at least one question that isn't like that. I'll have, what is your name? And then all the other questions will be that hard. And some of you will get that one wrong too, by the way. You'll get so stressed out by the exam. You'll be like, what is my name? Okay, so here's our nuns, right? Frequency of, and this is again from Canada, frequency of religious or spiritual practice on one's own. The majority of our nuns say not at all, right? So, weirdly, some percentage of them say, and again, Stata will drive you crazy if you think about it for too long, which I have, and it drives me crazy. Some meaningful percentage of them say, or in Canada, 43% say that religion and spirituality is important in their everyday life. Frequency of religious spiritual practices on their own, not at all, is 82%. So again, cuckoo pants, makes me crazy. And most of them are like, at least once a week. That's at least 9%. There's a huge disparity between them. So a lot of our nuns who say that that spirituality is important to them don't actually do anything. They're like, it's super important to me. I don't do any of it though. Frequency of religious service attendance, no surprise there, right? They're nuns, 81% of them don't do it at all. And basically the rest of it is a few times a year. So this is maybe like, you get dragged to a religious service at high religious festivals, right? Christmas, Easter, for Eid or Diwali or something like that, right? Passover, that would be it. Okay, a little bit more of a mixed bag when it comes to some other behaviors. Frequency of meditation, right? It's only, a little over half of them, that say not at all. So there's that, right? That's 49, 59% is like not at all or seldom. Frequency of reading religious scriptures outside of religious services, no surprise, right? We got 79% saying not at all or seldom, right? With a really small cohort. So this is highly consistent. Frequency of participating in prayer groups, scripture studies groups, or religious education programs. Again, no surprise there. We're at 89%, seldom or never. So that makes perfect sense. I mean, there still is this really small cohort who do it sometimes, but who knows why. And frequency of prayer outside religious services. It's a much more mixed bag. Right, we've got 38% who are in the at least once a week, a few times a month, at least once a week, or at least once a day, with 20% of the nuns saying they pray at least once a day. sometimes, it makes you want to scream. Okay. Do any of the graphs have a chance of being on the exam? Oh, that's where all the jokes have been coming from. They all have a chance of being on the exam. All of them. There's a whole section of the exam that is literally labeled in my test banks, graphs about religion. And I promise it won't be that bad. Or it will be. I don't know. Class average is a bit high. We're going to have to tank that thing. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Okay. Life meaning. Okay. I know right now, hearing about the exam in the future, you all feel like life has no meaning anymore. But this class is not about you. It's about the nuns. Okay. So, despite the commonly held view that religious people and by religious people that non-religious people are some kind of nihilists, that does not appear to be the case. So, according to a 2015 Angus Reid poll, those who reject religion are most likely to attribute, what happens in life to things like their own effort. 93% will say that. This is one of those select all that applies kind of categories. Chance, luck, and with 8% saying God. This is my favorite one. You get in kind of qualitative data, you get a lot of people answering things like everything, by saying stuff like everything happens for a reason. Though, and I just need to highlight this one. My wife's cousin has a tattoo that says everything happens for a reason and is not religious. And I always want to tease her about this because I always want to just be like, hey, if everything happens for a reason, what is the reason? And from whence does the reason come, right? And my wife tells me, shut up, no one likes you. You shouldn't pester my cousins with academic questions, for which I say, but why? It's fun. But this is pretty common for non-religious people, a kind of general sense that there's something I don't know, it's the universe, right? Oh, this is the one, it's the common one. It's the universe, some kind of universal force, right? That's directing fate. Or fate is a common one, or luck, or chance, or karma, right? All sorts of things get articulated in this category, but it's a kind of general statement that there is a reason things happen, but it's not God, right? Because only 8% of them would say that it's God. So again, one of the things that's pretty clear, and if you want to put this down to sort of like an academic theory, you're probably talking about something like invisible religion, right? Thomas Luckman's idea, because these are very boutique, right? So, invisible religion. And it's very boutique. And man, if you're sad about the graphs, you ain't seen nothing yet. I have more, I swear. All right. So, science. Trust in science is really, really high amongst the non-affiliated, right? Which is no surprise, right? Where are you going to get a sense of truth if you are non-affiliated, right? You're probably going to get it from some kind of naturalistic source. So it is science at the end of the day. Many, right, will say that science already has many of, or most of the answers to ultimate concerns. This would include things like ethics, right? And here you could put people like Sam Harris, the famous new atheist in this category. He'll make broad claims like, you can derive ethical principles from science, right? And from the natural world in particular. Okay, 86% of those who don't believe in God or a universal spirit report a strong sense of gratitude or thankfulness, right? And again, I know religious people will always, sort of point to this and be like, well, to whom, right? If you're going to be thankful, right? Thankfulness usually has a sort of object, but, again, people aren't consistent, and so we don't have to worry about that. 78% feel a deep sense of wonder about the world. 67% think about the meaning of life and then conclude there is no meaning of life, I presume. No, only if you go down the like really nihilistic Nietzschean direction. But most people don't make it to Nietzsche. Most people stop somewhere around Oscar the Grouch, I think. Sorry. Not quite as deep as Nietzsche. I'm kidding, of course. Not everyone's a pesky academic who reads Nietzsche. 63% think about what happens after death. So, still interested in kind of questions about ultimate reality and what happens and ethics and meaning and all of that stuff. Interesting. Okay, in terms of values for our non-religious, one of the things that Thiessen and Laflamme found, humanism and morality are sources of guidance, right? And they think of religion as a source of values. And here, if you'll note, I have A bolded. It's subtle because it's a single letter, and it's hard to make a single letter stand out. Yeah, there you go. A source of values rather than the source of values, right? So people can find meaning and values in religion, but you don't have to. And according to good old Reg Bibby, God rest his soul. He's actually not dead, but whatever. He's retired from academia, so he's as dead as he's going to be to me. So he said, among those who reject religion, 95% say it's not necessary to go to church to be a good person, and 91% don't think it's necessary to believe in God to be a good person, right? So again, religion is a source of values, not an essential source of values. The golden rule is a good rule to live by, either in personal relationships, or this one is fun, through the state, right? And one of the things that's clear and looking at the nuns, right, is when it comes to things like charity, it's often an idea that you should help people, but it tends to be much less direct, right? It tends to be through welfare programs, right? So the degree of helping people is largely, I pay my taxes, right? And my taxes should fund the social programs that help people, right? Whereas religious people are much more likely to say that, people should help, and the golden rule is a good thing in personal relationships and action, and that it needs to be lived out. Whereas the nuns much more likely to defer to the state. Okay. So, this isn't a chart, it's just well organized. Don't worry, charts are coming. What time is it anyway? Wait. So much time. Sorry, guys. I promise, we'll get through this on Thursday. And we might even end the course one day early. If my timing is what I think it will be, we should end next Tuesday, I think. I could slow down if you'd rather. No, okay, there we go. I could add another unit. I have one in the bank. I could just throw in here. No, okay. There's less charts than that. No, I lied. There's even more charts than that one. I'm kidding. I took my youth and religion out of this particular course so that I could have even more charts in other units. But that one has a lot of charts too. Okay, so our subtypes, right? And we got our 1, our 2, our 3, our 4, and our 5 types of nuns, according to Thiessen and Laflamme, not Thesis and Laflamme, are involved secular. These participate in atheist or humanist orgs. This is the smallest part, right? They are, this is, and when we go forward, oopsie, where's El Mauso? This is what Burge will call the zealous atheists. But these are a very, very small part of the overall population. Okay. So, more commonly, we have our inactive believers, or our inactive non-believers, sorry. No belief in God or a higher power, and they are slightly or not at all spiritual. And this is a big cohort. This is the meh, right? They do not care. They are not interested. They're not, they don't do anything, but they don't believe in anything either. And I think this will correspond largely with Ryan Burge's duns, but his is more catchy. This is less catchy. All right, inactive believers believe in God. Religious attendance less than monthly, right? So they're not very frequent attenders, and they are slightly or not at all spiritual, right? So kind of a mixed bag, like a general belief in a deity, but they don't really go and they don't really do anything either. Spiritual but not religious, right? A really common category, but actually in the data, not a huge one. Right? Spiritual but not religious, they will self-describe as moderately or very spiritual, but attend religious services less than monthly. And our involved believers, which believe in God or a higher power and attend once a month or more. Okay, so how can this be a category of the nuns, you might ask? And here we come to a sort of fundamental problem of social science. And how to put this politely. These people don't know what they are. And this is a really common problem in religion research. We have a pretty big group who just don't know what they are, right? They don't know how to categorize themselves, or potentially, because of some kind of ideological or theological predilection, they miscategorize themselves as nuns, even though they are probably more correctly categorized as, religiously affiliated. And this may happen, right, because you do have this kind of subculture within, especially in Christianity, where people will actually say that, how to put this in evangelical terms, it's not a religion, it's a relationship, right? Like you're in a personal relationship with Jesus. So you're not religious, you're in a relationship with Jesus. And I know you giggle, but there's a lot of people for whom I could show you videos where people are like, it's not a religion now. Anyway, they don't know what they are, they don't know how to categorize themselves. This is a problem that, as Ryan Burge will comment a little bit later, could be fixed in a lot of cases by adding just Christian to the surveys, which would largely fix this category. Okay. Spiritual but not religious, right? 39% of Canadian adults refer to themselves as spiritual but not religious in this Angus Reid poll, right? It's not a representative. Well, I mean, this is a good sample size, but it wasn't done. It's a quota sample, not a representative sample or a probability sample. So there are some kind of gaps in the data. 39% of Canadians adults refer to themselves that way. 41% of those with no religious affiliation, and 18% of those who say they are religious said they're spiritual but not religious. Right? Sorry. At one point, I should just have a mental breakdown in how people can't answer surveys. But it's 18% of the people who say they are religiously affiliated class themselves as spiritual but not religious, which is really weird, but whatever. Sometimes our tools don't measure people accurately. Okay, so we see this, right? And this is two samples, one in BC and one in Washington and in Oregon, right? So this is all Cascadia, broken into different parts of the sample, which again has certain problems in the sense of BC is not necessarily representative of all of Canada. BC is one of the least religious parts of Canada, so it's a little odd. But if we look at BC, okay, so BC, 1% of the non-religious are involved seculars. In Washington and Oregon, right, it's 3%. The bulk in both places are inactive non-believers. These are the MES. The bulk in both are, not inactive believers. Okay. spiritual but not religious, right? It's a quarter to a third in both places. And involved believers, a little bit more. Okay, among the religiously affiliated, no surprise, right? It's basically 0 in the US and 1% in BC. So like 2 annoying people answered this, and so we got up to 1%. Inactive believers, right? Among the religiously affiliated, okay, or inactive non-believers, right? Again, some weirdness in the data. Inactive believers, a pretty good chunk, lots of spiritual but not religious, and then among the religiously affiliated, no surprise, most of them in the US fall into this category of involved believers and a little bit less in BC. But again, even by Canadian standards, BC is a little weird. Okay, trends by subtype. This just gives you a kind of sense of over time what's been happening, right? So if we go back to 1998, compare it to 2016, and look at these categories, we see our non-believers have gotten a little bit bigger. The inactive believers got bigger here, and then they've kind of shrunk back down. Spiritual but not religious, right? That part of the graph has gotten fatter, and involved believers got a little bit bigger as well over time. Okay, I'm going to skip this last bar graph. I just don't want to talk about it. All right, now we're going to look at another view of the nuns, and this one from my buddy, who I've never met. If someone can arrange the introduction, that'd be great. Wow, I realized I did all this, but I didn't put any question slides in this part of the course. Can I put an announcement on Canvas with the slide numbers that will be removed on the exam due to inaccurate data? Yes, I can do that. How many graph questions could we get? Like, for example, in second round, 2 seconds. I don't remember. 5? 5? 3. I'll let you know. It won't be 5. This is fun. You're negotiating with me, and I like you, so we'll see what we can do. All right, so Ryan Burge, but there's so many graphs. How can you not want to talk about them? Okay. All right, so he has a different set of subtypes, right? And I actually like his a lot better because I actually think they're much easier to remember. So we've got our Ninos, the nuns in name only, the spiritual but not religious. So that's another category. The Duns, and the zealous atheists. Now, the interesting thing about this is a survey that Ryan Burge and someone else, and his name is escaping me at the moment, but it'll come to me, actually got to design. So this is a custom kind of survey, again, run through YouGov, so hopefully the data's good. They got this grant and they ran a project called the Making Meaning project. And one of the questions they're asking is about the nuns, right? And who the nuns are. All right, so the first category, the Ninos. Nuns in name only. So, of the non-religious part of the sample, what Ryan Burge says is they make up about 21%, right? So about a fifth of those who identify as non-religious he classes as nuns in name only. So, they're actually fairly religious on a bunch of metrics, but they still don't classify themselves as part of a religious group. Over half of them say they pray on a daily basis, right? So no religion would be a funny way to categorize these folks. And yeah, Burge believes this group poses a methodological problem for researchers. And he says, for reasons we'll explore in a future post, right? Because I copied this from his blog. These people aren't able to classify themselves properly. And this is the thing, right? And this is what makes social science interesting. They aren't able to classify themselves properly based on current approaches to asking about religious affiliation. Okay, I have charts and words. So, 2/3 of all Ninos say that spirituality is very important to them, right? The share who score high on that dimension and low on religiosity is 26%, right? So that's those who say they are spiritual but not religious, right? In a sense, it's about 26% of the Ninos. And I'm fighting the pen. They look a lot like religious Americans. Now, this is the fun one. The Ninos, of any of the nuns, they are by far the least educated in the sample, right? With a third of them saying that they have a high school education or less, the fewest number of them saying they either went to grad school or earned a 4-year degree. And they're kind of averagey, you know, roughly, except for the zealous atheists. A lot of them got a 2-year degree. But for the rest of the categories, you know, they're kind of in the middle. So this tells me immediately, without even looking, and this is going to sound bad, that these are probably evangelicals. Because evangelicals in America tend to score the lowest in terms of education, right? So if we're talking classification problems, this is a classification problem of evangelicals doing exactly what I described a few slides ago, saying I'm not religious because Christianity isn't a religion, it's a relationship with Jesus, right? And they have a personal relationship with Jesus. So I almost guarantee the bulk of these folks are evangelicals because their religious or their educational profile looks very similar to evangelicals. Okay. You know, in terms of like spiritual importance, right? A good chunk of them say, you know, spiritual importance is somewhat or very important, right? So we got, what, 30, 40% is very important. But on religious importance, right, it's not as high. Sorry, that's the bottom axis here. Okay. Spiritual but not religious. This is the largest group of the nuns. They are skeptical of religion, but highly interested in spirituality. 93% of them report attending religious services either seldom or never, right? So these are, I think, more fairly classified as nuns, right? The Ninos, right, pretty religious along a bunch of measures. The spiritual but not religious, you know, if we're talking religious service attendance, they don't go. Only 7% of them go more than seldom or never. And yeah, 75% of them say they trust religion not at all. Okay, that one was easy. Our next category, and how are we doing for time? Oh, wow. Super good. You like end it now, like 15 minutes early. The duns. All right, let's talk about our duns. Not surprisingly, they are done with religion, right? The duns of these categories basically don't. So the ghost just left the room because that door just opened randomly. The spirit of God has left, apparently. There we go. Like moving out of the temple. A little Easter reference for you, if you caught that one. On measures of religious and spiritual importance, they are very low. 77% of them, for example, say, when I die, my existence ends. Which I suppose still means like 23% of them don't think that, but it's interesting. They make up about a third of the nuns, right? 68% of them say religion is not at all important to them, and 22% said spirituality is not that important to them. They're just not that interested. All right, and the last category is the zealous atheists. This is, I love this picture, by the way. It makes me think of like Goku with like the flame behind it. I don't know why. It's 11% of the nuns. 77% of them, you know, say they've tried to convince someone else to leave religion in the past 12 months. Now, that said, they are a little bit more engaged than the duns, right? 17% of them attend a house of worship at least once a year, and about the same share say they prayed a little bit in the past year. Now, they're only about 3% of the American population. But again, I think those numbers, right, almost a fifth of them saying they've attended a house of worship once a year or more, or about the same share say they've prayed, but these are the zealous atheists, just goes to show how complicated people are, right? That is, you know, people's lives are rarely these really clean categories. There's all sorts of messiness in here, which if you haven't gotten that out of the last 2 units, I don't know what to tell you. Okay, so the age distribution, and again, so yeah, our Making Meaning Survey 2024, cool survey. When it comes to our age distributions, there's some interesting stuff as well. Of the zealous atheists, right, 45% of them are in this youngest part of the cohort. Now, if it was up to me, I would split these into smaller chunks, because I don't love 18 to 35. That's like young adults to like almost middle age, and I don't love the way that he's classed this data, but I don't have access to this data, so I can't rerun the visualizations or whatever. No big deal, right? I don't love 18 to 35. It's too broad for me, especially that the next category is way smaller, right? It's way narrower, but whatever. No one asked me. Unless they never do. How would you like this data classed? Not this way. I want more striations. Okay, our zealous atheists are pretty young though, right? 18 to 35. And by far the youngest cohort here, the Duns, right? So those who are totally out of religion. And this again, you know, it's interesting because when we think about, you know, people talking about how younger people are maybe more interested in religion, or some of that now discredited data from like the Quiet Revival, one of the things that's apparent is a lot of the Duns, right, are really, really old, right? We look at this, and it's what? 49% are 55 or older, right? So almost half of the Duns are 55 or older, right? That's really old, right? I mean, it's not that old, but it's really old. No, it's oldish, you know, by comparison. Comparisons to the, you know, the zealous atheists, right? It's 12% here, and so what, like 21%? Sorry, I'm having to do math on the fly here. 21% are 55 and older. So the more zealous atheists are, you know, they're a much smaller group, but they're very young, right? So there's maybe something to be said there. Our spiritual but not religious, right, are pretty young as well. You know, still a good chunk of them are old. What are we talking? 36% are old. But you see, it's a lot smaller. And then our Ninos, right, the people who don't know what the hell they are, it's a little, like 32% are really old. So they're, again, a considerably younger age profile, really clustered in, you know, 55%, or 54% are younger than 44, right? So young and vital, just like me. No, because I'm a year shy of 44. So the Ninos are pretty young. Spiritual but not religious are pretty young, as are the zealous atheists. Younger, I'd say, than the average profile of Americans. And Christians are pretty old too, right? We got 44% are, you know, 55 or older, so they're not that different than the Duns, right? So Christians are pretty old as well. And they come out on the low side of people in that youth cohort, right? So if we're talking generational replacement, right, what's likely to happen is these less religious cohorts, especially these two because they're bigger, are like, and I guess the Duns as well, or no, the zealous atheists, though they're really small, are likely to sort of replace Christians a little bit over time as a share of the population because their age profile's a bit younger. Okay. Stop? Stop? Fine. Very well. We'll come back to that on Thursday. Someone just had to yell stop. All right, I got to check for questions. before I leave. Oh, if you don't have those slides, it's because I uploaded them this afternoon. So you will find them if you look for the updated version. And I'll explain the midterm. Maybe I'll explain it next time. Okay. All right. Oh, right. There you go. No problem.
Hello.
How's it going?
Thanks for ending class.
Yeah, thank you.
I want to know, I always give, I lead campus tours.
Okay.
And one of our props, to talk about our favorite prop. You're always my highlight.
Oh, well, thank you.
I always find it better.
The data more concisely than the charts.
Just wonder, like, so like my grades pretty high. So it's
Okay.
we'll take an appointment for the in terms of people, which I was like, last week.
I mean, I guess it's kind of up to you. Like, it's more than likely that your mistakes are on the minor side and kind of like right.
But it's like, and like you were mentioning opening web response, so I'm like, well, like, should I like, would it be like useful or is it better like get that tagline?
Okay, let me just have a look at it if you don't mind me doing it in front of Erica, your nemesis. Yeah, I gotta open up some more. Honestly, like today, I haven't had 2 seconds. It's just like I did a reference letter for someone, and oh my freaking goodness, it took like an hour of my time because it was for a job with the CRP. I didn't want to know about things in like 7 different categories, like 7 text boxes. I'm like, oh my God, I'm like, this is abusive of referees. I get it, you're working for the police, but could you just have a checkbox that like good person? Check. They throw one. Yeah, yeah. Something broke. Always helpful. Oh, that's Eric. You're one up.
We're landscape twins, we're birthday twins.
Oh, really? That's funny. Separated at birth. Okay, that one I think I just didn't like your example. 10, 10, 10. I didn't like your example on the one question.
Oh, is that it?
That's it.
I'm trying to make it chill. I sit there, I'm like, I don't know what's right. I don't know. Sometimes I stare and I go, how dare you give me this question? Like, what the heck is this?
I warned you.
No,
Oh,
I know,
God,
but then I think I had I had micro and macro. I was like, why am I writing the same thing twice? But like, not really, but like sort of the same. It's like, why? Now I don't know what to say about the worst things.
At least you are in the camp you noticed. Because some people got the 2 questions and they didn't notice. So they were like, I got the same question twice. They emailed me. Like, I just copied and pasted the same answer twice. I'm like,
No, you didn't.
it was not the same question.
Like I would do the same things. Now I feel like I'm repeating myself, but like not really, like slightly.
Right. Yeah. So on like you got the micro one. The micro one was fine. The macro one, just
I was making up.
the example didn't work.
Okay.
So that's it. Everything else was 10 out of 10. So you just lost 4 marks.
Okay.
On that question, sure. Like on all the other ones you did great. So, in the balance, I caught you with make up your own example. And sometimes it's hard.
Yeah.
Right? Those are the harder ones.
I'm like, I'm sitting there. I'm just a great part now.
Yeah, that's fair, right? Those questions are so I wouldn't honestly like that's all it is, and I wouldn't worry infinitely about it. That's you know, pretty much it. Yes, I have to open up more slots. Once I posted those, they